Thank you all for joining us today. We'll get started with some brief introductions first, and then I will go over what we will be discussing with you all today. So my name is Julie Harm. I'm a director here who recently actually joined Fadmoor just less than 3 months ago. I come with over 15 years of management and strategy consulting experience, largely with a focus on large-scale implementations and more recently helping clients shape their AI strategy and drive adoption. So I'm very excited for this conversation today, to teach you a little bit more about AI and some capabilities with Anaplan and Claude as well.
Hi, I'm Kira Zayak. I'm one of the solution architects here at Fadmoor. I've been in the EPM space for over 6 years now, and I'm super excited to see all of the advancements in AI and be able to dive into some of those in Anaplan today.
Hi, my name is Abdullah Shah. I work alongside Kira at Fadmoor and similarly have seen AI kind of take over the world, if you may, really quickly. So we're really excited to show you guys some cool things you can do with existing tools you guys might have or some really cool offerings that Anaplan has. So yeah, really excited to get started here.
Yeah, so I'll briefly just walk through how we'll spend our time together. First, I'll share a little bit more about who Fadmoor is for those of you who have not worked with us yet and some of our areas of expertise, how we support our clients. Kira will then walk through a live demo of Anaplan CoModeler and their Agent Studio. And Abdullah will give a live demo on how you can export data from Anaplan into Claude for data analysis. So a couple different AI use cases we'll be covering. And then we will save some time for Q&A at the end. Feel free to use the Q&A feature. If you do want to pop any questions, you should see it at the top of the Teams window here. And we'll pause after each section of the live demo to go over any specific questions you have. And then we'll also have time at the end for some live Q&A. So to go into a little bit more again about who Fadmoor is, we are a strategic implementation partner of Anaplan. So we work alongside our clients to help configure Anaplan to their specific business. We were founded in 2021, and we've since led over 150 successful engagements, ranging in areas from FP&A, S&OP, and other planning use cases, which I'll touch on briefly on the next slide. And what makes this unique is really two things. First, our experience. So our leadership team has been doing enterprise planning for 15, in some cases 20 years, across Anaplan, Hyperion, SAP, and other similar platforms. And also our delivery model is very unique as well. We've built a global team with a large presence in Kigali, Rwanda, alongside teams here in the US, in India, Pakistan, and also Peru. An important note, and I think differentiator here, is that they aren't like an offshore team, just developers. They're truly consultants. They help lead meetings, own work streams, and they operate as partners to our clients. So the result we've found is high quality delivery at a competitive price point, which has really allowed us to grow quickly through repeat business and word of mouth as well. If we go to the next slide, I can just talk a little bit about some of the kind of broader use cases I mentioned, but this gives a little more of a detailed view of, specific FP&A, supply chain, sales performance management, as well as workforce planning use cases. And you can see we've spanned across a variety of industries, ranging from technology and SaaS, a lot of CPG, retail type clients, and even mining as well. And then you have various proven capabilities across these engagements. You can see here AI strategy and adoption, a newer area for us that we're very excited and again, leaning in today with you all. And then a variety of talent services as well. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Kira, to start to dive into the demo exciting portion of today.
Sounds good. Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much for joining today. I'm really excited to show you two of Anaplan's newest AI capabilities, CoModeler and Analyst. Over the next 20-25 minutes, we're going to explore what each of those tools are, who they're designed for, and some practical ways I've seen them in action, not only for implementation teams, but also for end users as well. We'll start with CoModeler, which is focused on the builder experience, and then we'll transition into the Analyst, which is more focused on helping business users get information from their data faster. So before I demo how to use CoModeler, I think it's really important that we level set on what CoModeler is. The first thing to know about CoModeler is that it lives directly inside the Anaplan model. it lives in the back end, so it's really designed for the people who are building and maintaining the Anaplan models every day. For example, model builders, the implementation teams, COEs, and client-side admins. When people first hear about CoModeler, they often misunderstand it as something intended to replace model builders. In my experience with AI tools in general, and also what I've seen of CoModeler, that's not actually where the value is. The value really comes from those users being able to spend time less on the repetitive manual activities and more time solving real business problems. So some examples that includes rapid prototyping and POCs. This is a complete game changer as far as what we can turn around and get back to the client, even within the same call, the same day. Completely different ballgame here. Extending existing applications. So we could start with a very bare bones, out of the box solution and make adjustments for the client's specific needs, and CoModeler can help with that. Creating documentation, that's not listed here, but highly important. I know we all want to do it more. I want to do it more. You want to do it more. I know you do. And CoModeler can review the model and create documentation for several different use cases. One that immediately comes to mind for me in my day job and what I do is testing plans. This one hits really close to home because it can often spend hours or even days going through all of the modules, all of the calculations, all the pages, trying to come up with what that test script is and what the key areas are for the end users to focus on. And using CoModeler, it's able to do that whole review and to actually highlight which calculations, which modules the end users need to come in and test and create that script for you. Last point on here is optimizing your existing build. It can review the model and return back with any modules that are working too hard or are way too much stuff going on in that one module. We need to separate it out, optimize your workflow, things like that. So these are just a couple of the use cases that we have listed out here, many of which we'll dive into today in some variation or the other, but there are many other applications for it as well. So now let's take a look at what that actually looks like in the Anaplan workspace. Navigate over into Anaplan. Once AI has been enabled in your workspace, you'll find CoModeler lives on the right-hand side of your screen. So if I click these two little stars, I'm going to expand this. One thing that's unique about CoModeler is it's actually both Planual and Anapedia aware. So it's not simply using just a large language model. It's also taking Anaplan's best practices, methodology, and implementation standards into account. So if I do a silly prompt like, tell me a joke about Anaplan, because it has all of the additional context, it's a really great place to bounce your ideas off of. Or you can do fun things such as ask it for an Anaplan joke. So let's see what it came up with for this time. But why did the Anaplan modeler break up with the spreadsheet? Because every time they tried to plan together, the spreadsheet kept putting them in cell therapy, while Anaplan was all about module growth. Haha, and you guys are dying laughing. The important thing here is that every time I've run this, I've gotten a different response. And that's actually what is expected because CoModeler is leveraging that large language model, so responses can vary. And because of this, it's important while we're building models because we want that flexibility to be in there. It's rarely ever a case where we're building a model and there's only one way to build something. We want to adapt and be able to change based on the client's requirements. So that's really important and why you get those different responses each time. And as we'll move into the analyst later, this is something to keep in mind since when we're using the analyst, you should be getting the exact same response each of those times. And that's because if I'm a financial analyst wanting to go into the pages and review my revenue target, I don't want to get one revenue target answer one day and a different number the next. That wouldn't make sense. So that's the difference between those two at a high level, and in this case, and we'll look into the analyst a bit more later. Now that we've looked at a simple natural language prompt, let's move into something that's a bit more practical. Most projects start with spreadsheets, lots and lots of spreadsheets, and the quickest thing that would be helpful, at least for me in my everyday job, is having something that would help review those, go through them, create the structures without me or my team having to do all of that work. So we're going to start this example by dropping in a very simple employee roster. You have to click the file and then drag it in here.
Yeah.
So traditionally, I would need to review that file, determine how I want to structure the hierarchy, create my list, establish the parent-child relationships, and then determine what structures I need to build to do that. But instead, I will drop it into CoModeler, and I've already written out the prompt, so I don't misspell this. But we're gonna drop it in there. And while that's running, let me actually show you the source file that I used. Something like this, really simple employee roster, but the concept is still the same, as you'll see, whether it's a really simple employee roster or a much larger and more complex file, it still works the same. This is just an easy example to show you guys kind of the structure that you could put in there and how it's helpful. So if we go back to what it came up with, it's created an implementation plan that we can review. And this is one of the most important concepts to understand with the CoModeler, but it's not removing the human from the picture because it came up with the implementation plan, but it's not going to run off and start making changes to your model by itself. You have to actually give it approval to do that. So we can see in our plan that it's identified the list, it's identified the employee hierarchy, the naming conventions, then the parent-child relationships. And at this point, I can either approve the plan or I can provide additional instructions and ask it to revise the plan before moving forward. So I'm going to approve the plan. It's going to run and make the changes. And then at that point, I can go into my model and review. And it gives you a good summary at the end, too, of where you can check out those changes just to confirm that everything is working as intended. In this example, I provided CoModeler with a very detailed prompt and a source file. But now I want to show you the opposite scenario. In here, rather than giving it a super detailed prompt, giving it the file, had everything there. This is an example where I took a much higher level business request and I kept the details a lot more vague to begin with and asked it, can you build me a basic compensation planning model? I want an area where I can input salary, variable, employee count assumptions, calculate expected commissions, etc. This may not seem vague, but the reason here is it needs to follow up with clarifying questions. So instead of just running off and building or even having the full plan, instead it starts by asking these questions. Questions like, what time range do you need? Do you need multiple versions? How are these things calculated? Are there any additional line items we need to add? And what's really powerful in this is that if a client came to me and asked the exact same request, build a comp planning model that's basic, whatever, I would ask many of these questions to begin the build too. Be like, okay, what time scale are we thinking? Do we need versions? Give me a little more detail here. So I think this is so cool because it's not just generating an AI plan that's basic. It's actually following a structured implementation thought process. And I think that is one of the most powerful things here. The final CoModeler example I want to show is probably one that would save me the most time personally.
It actually is really cool. Like it looked like in that prompt here that it was aware of the list structures and hierarchies that you had already in your model. And I know it seems so minor, but like we get so many of these files when we're starting out with an implementation. And you also get worried with like multiple files of the same. And it's like, hey, I missed this part in my employee roster. Can you please go reload this? And it'll take a person, like lots of time to go through and do it. Having CoModeler do it and just kind of be able to walk away while it spins everything up, that's huge.
I know, it's awesome. So I've switched into our SNOP model now, and I'm not quite as familiar with this model, both for this demo and also in general of this one. And so this is a really good use case because I'm going to let it come up with documentation for understanding the model. Where are the key calculations? Where are the models I need to look at? What pages, etc. So I'm going to go in here and I've already written out the prompt. Please describe the business process in this model at a high level. Focus on any key calculations or workflows.
It is helpful as you're moving between them that it gives you a fresh, screen to start off of. So as you're like typing out your new prompt, you've got your other model running on the side where you were making implementation changes. I think it's really helpful that it's not mixing all that context up between itself.
Yes, absolutely. As long as you keep the tabs open, it can keep the different conversations alive. So instead of spending hours tracing through all the models and calculations in here, I can instead just ask CoModeler to summarize the business processes and overall workflow in here. And what it's doing is reviewing the structures and putting together a high-level overview for me to look at. So if you think about the amount of time it would normally take for someone to review all this information and document it, we're probably talking hours or sometimes days, depending on how big the model is. And the fact that CoModeler can create this in a matter of seconds to minutes, it's loading for a second, but it's insane. So we'll give it just a second here to load, but then it should come up with a full walkthrough for me to take a look at.
And I love that you're using this specific demo model for this because it's actually a really dense full SNOP implementation. Like this is one of our live models that we use all the time for client implementations. It's got full demand planning in it. It's got full supply planning in it. It's even got some workforce planning in it. That's really cool that you're using this one. I'm really excited to see what it spits out.
Yeah. So I think that was like a minute. And yeah, like you're saying, this is a pretty big model. So very impressive for it to turn around that quickly. In here, it's laying out the key modules for me to look at, and it lists out kind of the purpose of each of them in order. And then something I want to highlight instead of going into all this detail, really concise, but don't want to read it all live. But the important thing here is down at the bottom, it gives you some key points that I like to review. And then also it gives you a step-by-step workflow of how it's working in the model. So I think the bottom section here is super awesome for a quick summary. And from here, you can just copy and paste this. You can drop it in an email, drop it in a deck, whatever you want to do with it, or just read it in here too. But this is one of my favorite features because moving across different modules and different workspaces, it's really helpful to get up to date quickly from an implementation side. But also if you're a new person on the client side coming in and wanting to learn more about your Anaplan model, this is a really great way to get caught up to speed and cut that ramp time in half. So super powerful feature here. Those were kind of the different use cases I wanted to go through for CoModeler. We talked about how it can use natural conversation-like language. We can take a look at how you can drop files into CoModeler and it can come up with those structures. We looked at the difference between the detailed prompts and the vague prompts and those clarifying questions. And then lastly, we looked at how it can help you with your documentation. With that, we're now going to shift into the analyst and how that helps the end users on the page side of things. So where CoModeler is focused on the builders, Analyst is really focused on the business users, executives, managers, planners, people who need answers, but not really any model expertise or don't want to go on the back end. So this is where the analyst comes into play. There's kind of a couple of different pieces here. There's something called the Anaplan Agent Studio. This is where you can actually link the models and your pages together to allow the analyst to work. And then we're not going to dive into how you set that up today, but happy to dive into that in more detail another time to show you step-by-step process of how that works. But what we're going to look at today is what the analyst looks like from the page side of things. So we've got this inventory exceptions report. If you have AI enabled, like I just mentioned, and have that synced between your models and the pages using the Agent Studio, you'll find this purple square with the stars up at the top. If you select this, you'll notice when I open this that it came up with several pre-prompted answers. This is something that you would set up in the Agent Studio, and this is something an admin or your implementation team could come up with. And these are set to be key questions that your end users are going to be asking. That way they know how to prompt it and they know what they're looking for in here. You don't have to ask prompted questions. You can ask any natural language question and it should come up with the answer. But this is a great way to make it even easier for your end users. So we're going to start with how many exceptions have days late. So I'll select one of those pre-prompted ones.
I love that you're able to build a story for people who are going to land on these dashboards because like you mentioned, like people who are landing on here, they may not have back-end model expertise. So you as people who know the model and who know the most frequent questions and sort of the right questions to ask to get the best value out of it. I love that you can pre-prompt that. That's really cool.
Absolutely. And the even cooler thing is I think you can have about 15 pre-prompted questions, not in one place, but as you move between the different pages, it will automatically change them based off the contents of the individual page. So if you were to move to another page, it would have a different list of 3 questions.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, you probably have seen this in ChatGPT or Claude sometimes. It'll prompt you another question. I really like that, and similar to here, it gets you thinking about, oh, that was a question I wouldn't even have asked, but that's very, very valuable to tell the whole story. So I think that is a neat feature to kind of get people thinking and interacting with it the best way that they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like it came back with the answer. So there's one exception with 8 days late. And then even within here, like I mentioned, you can ask natural language questions on top of it. So if I ask which of the exceptions actually has those days late, then it should be able to come back with that. And this is all part of the process where you give it that context to understand the different pieces, to know what the late days mean, what the exceptions are. So that's something that you'll play around with in your individual models and workspaces to get it to understand exactly what each of these pieces mean. Sometimes that's a little more sensitive than others, but it all just depends on the context you provide it. From here, you can ask any of the other questions, ask natural language, and you can move throughout your pages. If you've set up your analyst once for your app, you're able to move across all of the pages and the analyst will live there. The difference with CoModeler and the analyst is CoModeler, it lives within the one model. But with the analyst, it actually can move across multiple models because in your pages, you can have multiple models linked to the same page. So there's a couple other differences there and the benefits of each. And I think that was all I had planned for the CoModeler and the analyst. I'm going to pass it over to my amazing colleague, Abdullah. He knows more about this next segment we're going to discuss than anyone else I know. And so I'm going to let him talk about Anaplan and Claude and how they work together. So over to you, Abdullah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for walking us through that, Kira. That was some great functionality. Obviously, looking at the external AI side, I don't always get to see all the stuff Anaplan is cooking up, and it really does look like some of the offerings now are becoming more and more robust as we go forward. So the idea behind this next section here is that while we got to see some really cool functionality when you are living within the world of Anaplan, you're not really restricted to it. And I think, Julie, we were having a really lovely conversation about how a lot of our clients and us internally as well have been leveraging our AI tools that we're using. So you think about Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude specifically as one of the top AI tools out there. We're using that to explain things to us that Anaplan is showing us as exceptions. So a lot of the times what we end up doing is we'll build exception reports in Anaplan and we'll say, tell us when we go above or below a certain threshold or above and below a certain acceptable range of outcomes. So Anaplan's really, really good, as you guys might know, about declaring when an exception occurs, but it's not natively able to explain the why, the how, the when of why things are happening. And so one thing we can do as a natural extension to that is be able to take data from Anaplan, grab an exception, for example, very similar to how Kira was prompting the Agent Studio to say, hey, how many exceptions do I have with the days late on there? Or how many exceptions do I have and what's kind of driving those exceptions? And be able to leverage Claude to do it. So if you're a company that already has an additional or an external AI tool that you guys are leveraging for your standard day-to-day workflows, whether you're doing it to optimize, as an executive assistant, using it to optimize your emailing and your task tracking or your documentation, or you're using it to even ask it questions about, hey, I'm trying to build something in Anaplan. Can you build me a rough, wireframe diagram? You can use that, take it one step further, and have it explain and build narratives around exceptions. So here, what we're going to really quickly give you guys a demo of is how we can grab exception data coming out of Anaplan, how we can attach some related data to it to be able to say, I have an inventory out of stock report, kind of building on what Kira was showing you. Show me what the supplier data looks like, what the forecasting data looks like, what does my historical sales actuals data look like. Package all of that up and be able to send that out to Claude, which is this middle section you're looking at here, where you would then have Claude interpret that data and build a narrative to say, hey, given all these data points, I can triangulate for you why an exception occurred, and then be able to build some kind of recommendations around when it provides that data back to Anaplan. It hands off both an explanation of why something happened and also a recommendation of what steps you can take to remedy the problem you're looking at. So what we'll really quickly look at here, flipping into the live demo, is landing back at the same page where Kira was kind of jumping off from. The idea here is we looked at an exception and we were able to find that, some of our exceptions are being driven by POs being delayed. Some of them are being driven by demand being too high and not being caught over lead time. So there's lots of reasons and lots of explanations. It's not always easy to tell with like standard reporting of saying, well, I know what my weekly demand looks like. I know my demand is up 5%, but I don't know if that's huge enough to actually trigger an out of stock. I should still have some safety in here, but I can see that my on hand is at 0 right now. So there's something that's not quite working correctly. So what I can do here really quickly is I can say, well, let's go pick an exception. We'll take the first one as an example here, and we'll say, let's go pick my first exception. And Anaplan can then pull forward the data regarding the exception. So any kind of backend data we would need to feed into Claude, any additional data, like what did my demand signal look like? What's my open POs look like? What's my supplier performance look like? Be able to kind of build all those pieces without the planner having to review it, and then be able to ship that off to Claude to basically say, and this is the really cool part, is you can do this manually as well, which I find myself doing all the time. I'm sure you guys might find yourself doing it. I'll grab a bunch of data from Anaplan. I'll prompt it to say, hey, can you find me why this thing is happening? Just because I'm going to go step away, grab a coffee. And then by the time I get back, it'll probably figure out what's going on or have a direction for me to go into. So I can basically pick an exception, package up my data, and press the button here to generate an insight. So you'll kind of see the two steps here is one, we're going to push the data out. Two, we're going to pull the exception back in. And you can really quickly say that Claude can build for us a headline of what's happening to say, hey, SKU 003 in here, which is a Gadget Pro, is out of stock at DC North. So we have an inventory stock out situation. That's kind of the highlight or the headline of your problem. And then it's able to build some narratives around what happened, why it happened, and some recommendations around what you'd like to do to remedy the situation. So here I can build a story around why something might have happened. And we can see in here like the replenishment on a specific PO. So it'll tell you what PO it was looking at. It'll tell you what the units on the PO was. So you can see we're short because PO 1042 with 220 units on it is 8 days late. It was due to come in 518. We're at 6/4 here and still not here. So the idea of like trying to understand really quickly without having to dig through all the data, which obviously a human can do, but you without digging through the data, be able to figure out what happened and why did it happen. Now that's one example of the what, the why, and then the really cool part is like, what should I do next? So as part of your SNO, like your standard operating procedure of like, when I have a stock out, step one, what's my next purchase order? Can I expedite that purchase order? Can I dual source it from somewhere else on a shorter lead time? So those kind of processes that you would run through as a planner, you can bake into Claude and to say, well, go build me that list of recommendations, and then have anybody go down the checklist to say, step one, check if I can do step one, step two, step three, and then remedy the situation with it. One exception is really cool, but what we found people really leveraging Claude with Anaplan for is to be able to on a nightly basis set up and say, I'm just going to export all my exceptions out. So when my planner lands in the following morning and pulls up Anaplan and lands on their landing page, it has all the exceptions kind of pre-built out. We do that on our side quite often is we'll have Claude help us pull together things like this, whether it's exceptions, whether it's data anomalies coming in from like integration, and point those out to us to be like, hey, this morning you might want to review X, Y, and Z and help us do that. So taking a look at a bit of the back end of like how we do this, of what the prompting looks like, I'll flip over here real quick and show you guys. It's really, really simple, and anything that you, myself, or anybody else would very naturally do with Claude or any other AI tool is being able to give it a very constrained, very specific, thought out prompt and be able to explain to you why you're prompting it, to be able to kind of tell it, hey, I want you to be direct. I don't want you to hallucinate with fake data. Don't make any random relationships between data that doesn't exist. Don't guess, don't make things up, the standard recommendations you want to provide Claude. And then from there, explaining what the task at hand is, being able to say, hey, I'm going to provide you an exception. I'm going to provide you a fact pack, which is going to have all the associated data you might need to build a narrative and answer the question for me. And I want you to then give me very, very specific pieces of information, which is where we talked about you get a headline, one sentence telling me what's happening, and then what happened, why it happened, what to do. So you'll see it's really easy to kind of take this and then make it work for you guys if you think of your data differently. If you want an answer that's like broken out into 5 or 6, or you want to know the specific PO that's late, you want to know the specific supplier that's not working, that's not producing a good output. So you can kind of break that out into your prompt here, and you could provide it your constraints to say, okay, I don't want you to go look at specific data, or I don't want you to look at POs that are, or actuals that are more than 4 weeks old. You can give it very specific constraints. And then the next part of it, which is kind of the back end part of it, is like you technically then have to grab all that data from Anaplan, put it into a structure that Claude can read very easily. And that's where we kind of package our fact pack that we were looking at into a JSON structure and then put it in here for Claude to be able to read and then produce an output with. So quickly heading back in here, what we kind of looked at here is obviously Kira walked us through the in-house functionality of what Anaplan can do. And then the extension naturally to that is, okay, we have a really cool external tool, whether that's Claude or something else. We're able to use that to do all these amazing things. Anaplan becomes a natural extension to it to say, I have all these cool exception reports in Anaplan. There's 40 items on there. I don't want to go through each one without some reference of what's going on or why it's happening. And so we're able to source that data out, feed it to Claude, feed it some very specific instructions and specific constraints to make sure it's providing the best and most concise answers possible. Source that back into Anaplan so your planners can view everything in one roof. You've got your exception right there. You've got your factual data right there. And then you've also got a narrative that's built or pre-built, I should say, from Claude right there.
Something, Abdullah, I was just going to add, as you were showing the prompt, I think something I love to use Claude for as I'm writing prompts is you can even ask it, this is a prompt I'm working on for XYZ, offer some improvements or additional information. So just something to note. Some people look at a prompt and say, ooh, that's overwhelming and would be, a lot to think to write that. But you can actually use Claude to help you shape your prompts. And then you can, as Abdullah said, then you can have your set prompt, test it out, gives you the output you expect, and then you can use that going forward. So just wanted to note that. I know that's helped me improve my prompts, over the kind of recent years as I've been using it more.
Absolutely agreed. A funny story is I always tell Claude to come up with the rules for engagement. So whenever we're working on a new project, we tell it about a client or a customer, we always tell them like what their business constraints and what their requirements are to be like, hey, never do this, never do this, never do this. And then I have it shape that to be like, tell me the best way to tell you these rules so that it's the most concise possible. And you're not, my biases in the way I phrase things are not clouding it for you. So yeah, that's a great call out. Perfect. I think that's basically what we had on our side. I know if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take those. I did see one coming in, Kira, for you specifically, was regarding if we can ask follow-up questions. So I know you might have gone over this, but was wondering if you could expand on the ability to kind of, as we build our documentation, we were looking at that really cool model with like demand planning, supply planning. Are we able to like have it expand and be like, okay, particular piece, give me some more information?
Yes. Within CoModeler, there's about 5 question limit. So it's not like a Claude or ChatGPT where it continues to learn on itself. That's more just from the security side to protect all of the client's information. You have 5 questions though, and then on the analyst, I believe it's 3. So it'll build on itself up until those questions, and there's a bit of room depending on character limit and things like that. But that's generally the rule of thumb.
Awesome. I know we're also coming up on time here. Julie, any questions on your side coming through?
No, not any additional ones that I can see here. If anyone wants to come off and ask anything live, post it in the chat. Sometimes the Q&A, mine was taking a little time to load. So if we missed anything, feel free to either use the regular chat feature or come off mute. And we are happy to, as you want to go to the next slide, we do have, a contact email here. If you do have any more specific questions or would like to discuss anything you saw today in more detail and how maybe it could be something that you and your organization could benefit from, please feel free to reach out.
It looks like there's a question that came in the chat. What's the best way to evaluate the AI capabilities? If you want to come off mute or maybe provide a little more context, is there a specific area, either CoModeler,
Happy to guess with the evaluation of AI capabilities if you'd like. I'll start and then happy to have you ask or provide more context. I think one of the best ways, as I was looking at it as well, like I mentioned, we don't get to see Anaplan's own in-house tools and what they're cooking up. And I believe the capabilities are are evolving very rapidly in the background, just with the investment that's being put behind it at the moment by Anaplan and the team itself. The ability to kind of go from being not just front end, which is, I think where a lot of people are leading with, is being able to do the agent studio part of it and being able to do the analyst part of it to ask questions. I think the real robustness in the AI capabilities Anaplan's providing right now is to be able to build in the background and be able to link with it to say, hey, I'm going to ask you questions about a report. Awesome. But first, help me build the report. Like, go build out the list structures, go build out the entire design frame for it, and then be able to execute on that as Kira was kind of showing us. And then taking that to the next step of going on the front end and being able to prompt really good storytelling questions for people to say, hey, as you land on this page, here are like the 5 key critical questions that you should be asking the page to understand what's going on, why it's happening, what do I need to be focusing on, and what do I need to be looking at. And I think that holistic view of like the back-end capabilities of AI, the front-end capabilities of AI together under one roof with Anaplan, I think that's really the cutting edge that's on offer at the moment.
All right. Well, I think we had this around 45 minutes, a couple minutes over, but appreciate everyone for joining. And again, feel free to reach out at the sales@fadmoor.com email, and hope everyone enjoyed the presentation today. And thanks again, Kira and Abdullah. That was great.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.
Great rest of your day.